All right, Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat Shalom. You are live and direct once again with your Akazaki Yahoo, and I'm giving all praises, honor, and great esteem unto the Most High Power, Yahuwah Bahashem, Yahushua Hamashiach, and to the 12 tribes of Israel who were scattered to the four quarters of the earth. I say Shalom, Wa Baruki. That is peace and blessings. And I cannot wait till the day that the Most High brings us back together, and we are once again 12 tribes, one family, one nation under the Most High Power, under one covenant, back in our own land with a heart of flesh and no more a heart of stone, with our enemies, our adversaries, and all those who hate us under our feet. Hallelujah.
So be it. Hallelujah.
Hallelujah. Indeed, I am joined this afternoon by my most esteemed Akinanaya. Shabbat Shalom, my king.
Hey, Shabbat Shalom, Maki. Ashar Shabbat Yom. Yasharal. Hallelujah.
Hallelujah. Happy Sabbath day. Israel, Yasha'al, Yasha'Allah. Praises to the Father. Hallelujah. We are back again for another video review on this Sabbath Yom. We're going to get directly to it and we got about 4 videos for you, rather short, but good information, most high willing. We're going to begin with the brother Aggressive Intelligence. This is convict leasing become the new slavery. How convict leasing has become the new slavery. Let's get to it and get through it. Here we go.
Imagine a system so insidious, it systematically exploited the labor of freed individuals, turning freedom into chains again. This was not just a remnant of the past, this was convict leasing in the post-Civil War South. Join us on Aggressive Intelligence as we delve into this dark chapter in American history, exploring the origins, the brutality, and the lasting impact of a practice that perpetuated racial inequality and economic exploitation. The roots of convict leasing originated in the aftermath of the Civil War, precisely during the era of Reconstruction, 1865 to 1877. With the economy of the South in tatters, former slave owners looked for a means of retaining cheap labor now that slavery had been abolished. The 13th Amendment, while outlawing slavery, allowed for involuntary servitude as punishment for crime, a gigantic loophole that paved the road for the exploitative practices that would follow. As black codes were passed, laws that aimed at controlling the newly freed black population emerged. These laws criminalized small offenses such as vagrancy, loitering, or not having proof of employment on one's person, and thus greatly increased incarcerations. The southern states turned quickly to leasing convicts to private enterprises, thus acquiring a captive workforce at virtually no cost. By the late 1860s, convict labor had become integral to the economy, as private companies eagerly contracted with states. This new system solved the desperate search for revenue by southern state governments, while effectively allowing industries to profiteer from the cheap labor of imprisoned African Americans. The transition from slavery to convict leasing demonstrated a continued exploitation of black labor. Among the first steps taken to assure white supremacy from the South in the post-Civil War period were the Black Codes. Established by the South due to the Reconstruction Act, these acts constrained the rights that were allowed to the new African American freemen, and indeed, a source of labor was availed through it. What this really became was just another type of slave code system, enabling criminalization through black social, economic, and civil rights. Key features of the Black Codes included strict vagrancy laws, which declared that any unemployed black person could be arrested. These laws facilitated the arrest of countless individuals for not conforming to labor expectations, often leading to forced labor in private industries as part of convict leasing arrangements. The enforcement mechanisms were brutal, with law enforcement incentivized to round up as many black individuals as possible. These laws further implemented the policy of forced apprenticeship, whereby black children could be taken and compelled to work by white employers, many of whom were former enslavers. It extended a system of exploitation well after the supposed legal end of slavery and entangled white supremacy into the South's economic framework. The 13th Amendment, ratified in December 1865, banned slavery and involuntary servitude, but contained in its wording the infamous loophole that would become a source of grave consequences in allowing involuntary servitude for punishment of crime. The 13th Amendment states, neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States, or any place subject to their jurisdiction. The exemption thus became the legal cover for convict leasing, and was manipulated by Southern states to launch a new economic order resembling slavery, without its inflammatory title. This was the legal bedrock upon which Southern legislatures could establish a range of laws that criminalized mundane activities for Black communities, and then funneled them into the system to lease them out for labor. The phrasing of the amendment would become one of oppression, not liberation, and opened the door to mass incarceration for African Americans. The consequences of exploiting this loophole were far-reaching. As the states realized the financial advantages gained by leasing convicts, they started to refine those laws which criminalized Black behavior, and thus increased not only the rates of incarceration, but also state revenue from convict leasing. This would be one of those obvious instances where legal frameworks could subvert the very meaning of freedom. Convict leasing was a very lucrative business for state governments and private businesses. Poor, underfunded states greatly benefited by leasing their prisoners. Revenues from leasing contracts replenished the state coffers while at the same time cutting the expenses of operating penitentiary facilities. By the end of 1898, convict leasing contributed an astonishing 73% to Alabama's yearly state revenue. Private businesses also made enormous profits by utilizing convict labor. They paid the state nominal fees for the rights to lease convicts, much less than what they would pay for ordinary labor. This economic advantage came with horrific compromises in which the well-being of the prisoners was sacrificed for profit. Companies had every incentive to maximize productivity with minimal investment in worker care. These deals were so profitable that they provided states with a very lucrative motive for arresting more people in the name of law enforcement. The legal framework encouraged prisons to be revenue generation machines rather than places for the rehabilitation of convicts. This economic model fundamentally changed the way society viewed incarceration, comparing it to an industry built on profit. Convict labor was shifted to heavy and dangerous industries, which completely restructured the Southern economy. The three heavy industries were agriculture, mining, and railroad construction. Each industry required a labor force that was not only inexpensive, but also disposable. Inmates were subjected to abysmal conditions, with many experiencing hardships similar to those under slavery. In agricultural settings, convicts worked on big plantations, most of the time planting cotton and tobacco. Overseers implemented violent methods of enforcement to discipline the prisoners for efficiency in work performance. The culture of violence cultivated in these agricultural settings had lasting impacts, with many serving lifelong physical and psychological disabilities. Another sector that prospered using convict leasing was mining. The convicts were sent deep inside the coal mines, usually with the guards' surveillance armed. With the lack of any safety measures, the rates of injury and accidents at work became extremely high, contributing to mortality rates among the laborers who were imprisoned. Prisoners worked long hours underground, exposed to dangerous gases, collapsing tunnels, and extreme temperatures. Such hazardous conditions depict a grim picture of the realities the convicts had to face. Building railroads required convicts to perform heavy labor, such as laying tracks, clearing debris, and breaking rocks. Workers were often overworked to exhaustion under harsh weather conditions, with little rest or food. Convicts were also sent to remote locations to cut timber or extract turpentine, often in unsanitary camps where disease outbreaks were common. The living conditions of the convicts under the leasing system were very bad, characterized by neglect and abuse. The quarters were overcrowded, unsanitary, and had little concern for hygiene or safety. This led to the outbreak of diseases like tuberculosis and cholera, which was made worse by the minimal access to food and clean water. The prisoners were given very minimal rations of food, which in most cases comprised plain foods devoid of nutritional value. This inadequate diet led to malnutrition, which weakened the prisoner and made them more vulnerable to diseases and other injuries. Living in unsanitary conditions and being malnourished, convicts faced daily struggles that took a heavy toll on overall health. Medical attention for prisoners was almost nil. If a prisoner happened to be hurt or sick, the usual modus operandi followed was to deny all requests for care, so that the individual should continue working in worsening health. This deliberate denial made prisons death traps. Many were laid low and died in their sickness, oftentimes without recourse. Cruelty was a prime attribute of the convict leasing system, whereby overseers took harsh punishment to keep the worker in control. Common, brutal corporal punishment included frequently beaten and whipped for minor offenses, and such things became methods to be performed in relation to an assertion of authority. The act of violence created fear within the environment and reiterated subjugation among the black workers. The lessee firms had full authority over the convicts, for which the violence was whimsical because the guards sought to maximize the output. Minor infractions led to severest of punishments, flogging, and public displays of punishment. The culture of violence inculcated among the guards and overseers was not restricted to discipline alone. This reflected a general societal callousness toward black lives. Most convicts were treated like dispensable commodities, no more than tools for profit. Before we delve deeper into the legacy of convict leasing, we encourage you to subscribe, share, and comment below about what stories you'd like to hear next. Your engagement motivates us to continue uncovering and sharing more untold narratives from our past. The mortality rates were extraordinary in the convict leasing system. Reports suggested that 1 out of every 10 leased convicts died, a death rate 10 times higher than in states that did not lease convicts. Overwork, coupled with poor living conditions, physical abuse, and lack of medical care, combined in a storm of premature death reflective of a system fit for exploitation, not rehabilitation. Alone in 1873, an astonishing 25% of all black leased convicts died during their imprisonment. That alone serves as a significant indicator of the conditions being lethal to which these persons were exposed. A lot of the victims succumbed to diseases that could have been prevented, but considering the horrific environment imposed on them, turned fatal. Historian Robert Perkinson estimated that upwards of 30,000 people across southern states died directly due to convict leasing between 1865 and 1940. The 2018 discovery of the Sugarland 95 was an important landmark in the painful history of convict leasing. Human remains from 95 Africans were uncovered during construction work for a new school in Sugarland, Texas. Archaeological examinations revealed that these persons died because of the convict leasing system working in this area during the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Forensic analysis upon examination showed that many of them found had diseases and brutal treatment, which mostly led to early deaths. The Sugarland 95 not only serve as a reminder of this dark historical period, but also signal the systemic exploitation and violence that characterized the convict labor system across the U.S. South. These events were received by the community with great sadness and demands for remembrance. By the time DNA research projects began to identify possible descendants of the Sugarland 95, it emerged that those buried had various important stories to tell. Reconnections essential in reconnecting the present and the past. One of the most infamous cases regarding convict leasing is that of Martin Tabert, a young white man whose sad end exposed all the evils of this practice. In 1921, Tabert was arrested in Florida for vagrancy, one of those catch-all charges so often deployed to criminalize poverty. He was sentenced to serve under the convict lease system. His case epitomized how arbitrary and cruel the legal system was when it came to laws perpetrating exploitation. Despite his family's efforts to pay off his fines, Tabert was leased to the Putnam Lumber Company, where he was subjected to inhumane conditions. His refusal to yield to the overseer's violent means of discipline led to his death at the hands of a whipping boss, thus exposing the brutal treatment one faced in the convict leasing system. The media reports of his death stirred public outrage that created calls for reform, which eventually brought an end to convict leasing in many states. His story still haunts as a reminder of the number of human lives affected by systemic racism and labor exploitation during this dark chapter in American history. As public awareness of the abuses inherent in convict leasing grew, so did opposition to the system. By the early 20th century, widespread outrage over the treatment of convicts led to legislative reforms aimed at abolishing the practice. Activists, labor unions, and reformers mobilized to shed light on this inhumane system, calling for humane treatment of the incarcerated. While Alabama was the last state to formally end convict leasing in 1928, significant political opposition remained strong. since many local politicians benefited handsomely from it. However, public pressure became so intense, along with awareness of the brutality that the convicts had to bear, that it finally stopped leasing. Although convict leasing was abolished in name, the practice would survive under other guises, including chain gangs. The fact that these exploitative labor practices would persist for such a long period speaks volumes regarding deep-seated issues with the American approach to both incarceration and labor, an ongoing challenge that resonates in today's debate on prison reform. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the dark history of convict leasing. We hope this exploration shed light on the injustices of the past and stimulates dialogue around the present state of our criminal justice system.
Man, that was that was intense. I had heard some about convict leasing, but I really wasn't that privy to it. To this detail. Wow. Uh, now they don't do that setup anymore. Of course, they don't do the whipping posts and all that type of stuff now. I get that, but uh, I thought they still did like labor, where you had to go out to labor and whatever the case.
I believe that here locally. I mean, well, I'm not sure about Indiana, but I'm pretty sure they do in Kentucky.
Okay, because
I know they do in Louisiana.
yeah, because they'll put as it's been a while since I've seen that, but I know in Arkansas they used to have those guys they go out to the roads and they pick up the trash. And
Yeah, they still do that here as well.
okay. Well, I guess that's not as bad, depending on what it is that they're doing. But you talking about sticking people in mines and things of that nature. That's crazy. So, man, yeah. So I wasn't aware. I was not aware. So, man, that's interesting information. So, I'll yield there. Go ahead, Aunt.
Con, I was aware of I didn't know what it was called, but I knew that companies as well as states were benefiting off of the labor of convicts, and it was really modern day slavery. You've got these Fortune 500 companies that are getting most of their products manufactured off of prisoners. There's a big list. I mean, you can really Google it, like all of the Fortune 500 companies that use products manufactured by prisoners. Something else I was thinking about with this, and I done lost my train. Oh, but to summarize all of this, I would say, we complain about the system, but the system is doing what it was set up to do.
Mm-hmm. Indeed.
I digress there.
Indeed, Aki. It definitely is doing what it was put in place to do, and that's to deal with our people as harshly as possible. So, yeah, that's something to definitely think about. We're gonna change gears and get to the next video. This is the baddest, bravest man you never heard of, unless you don't watch this channel or and seen some of this information that we brought out. We've actually highlighted. We have a video highlighting this brother's actions before, but this is brought to us by 400 Years. So all links, as always, are in the description box. So feel free to check it out. Let's get to the video here.
Welcome to 400 Years, a channel that explores Black history, heritage, and perspectives. We are dedicated to remembering and reclaiming our past through meaningful discussions. Join us as we shine a light on the often overlooked narratives that have been silenced, suppressed, or ignored, from the haunting legacy of the Atlantic slave trade to the profound impact of Black literature and Black culture. In this episode, we're going to tell you about the bravest, baddest man you've never heard of, Mississippi State Senator Charles Caldwell. Born in the bowels of the slave South, Senator Caldwell stared down murderous, racist thugs with courage and grit. Join us on this enlightening journey as we explore the rich tapestry of Black history and celebrate the resilience, strength, and triumphs of our ancestors. In 1834, Mississippi was a hellhole of degradation. It was a state that heavily relied on large-scale labor, with a significant population of enslaved Black people. The institution of slavery was deeply entrenched in Mississippi's economy and society, shaping the lives of both enslaved individuals and white residents. Slavery was brutal and harsh throughout the United States, but conditions for slaves were often worse in Mississippi compared to the Upper South, like Virginia and North Carolina. Slaves who were sold from the Upper South to Mississippi were also forcibly separated from their families and communities, which was an additional traumatic experience. Indeed, for the enslaved, few fates were worse than being sold down the river, a phrase that, from its very beginning, meant not just a betrayal, but a betrayal that leads to a significantly worse situation. Nobody wanted to be a slave in Mississippi. In the first place, Mississippi had a climate and geography that was ideal for large-scale plantations, especially those producing cotton, sugar, and rice. These crops were labor-intensive crops that required long, strenuous hours of work, often under very harsh conditions. Secondly, Black people in Mississippi during this time were subject to oppressive conditions. Enslaved people faced grueling labor on plantations, working in agriculture, primarily cultivating cotton and other crops that formed the backbone of the state's economy. Black Americans endured physical abuse, severe punishment, neglect, malnutrition, extremely long working hours, and generally lived in deplorable living conditions. Families were often torn apart, as they could be sold or separated at the whim of their white enslavers. Slaves were denied basic rights and freedoms, treated as property, and had no legal status or autonomy. The state's legal system supported and protected the interests of slaveholders, ensuring that the institution of slavery remained intact. Despite the unimaginable hardships they faced, enslaved Black Americans in Mississippi demonstrated resilience, maintaining cultural practices, traditions, and community bonds. They often relied on oral traditions to pass down stories, knowledge, and resistance strategies from one generation to the next. This is the environment into which Charles Caldwell was born and lived his whole life. His birth year is believed to be 1831, though precise details about his early life remain unknown. Born into slavery, Caldwell later became a skilled blacksmith in Clinton, a small town near Jackson, Mississippi. As a result of his craftsmanship, Caldwell enjoyed relatively more autonomy compared to other plantation slaves, earning him significant respect within the community. After the Civil War, his status allowed him to venture into politics. In 1868, Caldwell was one of 16 Black Republicans who actively participated in the Mississippi Constitutional Convention. However, the proposed constitution they crafted was ultimately rejected in a statewide referendum. Despite this setback, Caldwell's involvement in politics marked a pivotal moment for his journey from a life of slavery to one of influence and participation in shaping Mississippi's political landscape. In 1870, he was elected to the Mississippi State Senate. He served in the Senate for 5 years, and during this time he became known as a staunch radical Republican, voting for both the 14th and 15th Amendments, as well as additional measures to bring racial equality to the state. Caldwell's primary focus during his time in office was resisting a wave of anti-Republican and anti-Black violence, which spread through Mississippi as anti-Reconstruction Democrats were determined to reclaim the state legislature. It is estimated that between 1870 and 1875, the Ku Klux Klan and other white supremacist organizations killed several hundred Black men and women, as well as some white Republicans. Despite the violence, Caldwell believed in the political process, and in 1875, he invited a prominent Democratic speaker to open a major Republican Party rally before the election. Mississippi started allowing freedmen to vote in 1867, setting the stage for the 1875 election to further integrate Black men into the state's political landscape. The Mississippi Republican Party scheduled political rallies on September 4th at Utica, Clinton in Hinds County, and Vernon in neighboring Madison County, anticipating the November 2nd polls. Clinton, just under 10 miles west of Jackson, the state capital, saw Black Republican families congregate at Moss Hill, a former plantation ruined by Union forces during the 1863 Vicksburg Campaign. Attendance varied from estimates of 1,500 to 2,500, mostly freedmen and their kin, enjoying a day of picnicking and political discourse. Around 75 white attendees were present, including 18 armed, intoxicated whiteliners, essentially the Democratic Party's paramilitary branch of ex-Confederate soldiers and their kin in Mississippi. Anticipating racial tensions, Republican Governor Adelbert Ames was supposed to address the crowd. But instead, Captain H.T. Fisher, a former Union officer and local Republican newspaper editor, took his place. Emphasizing open discussion and educating new voters about elections, Caldwell and other Republican leaders from Hinds County invited the local Democratic Party to send a speaker. Democratic State Senate candidate Amos R. Johnston spoke for an hour without disruption. However, when Fisher took the stand, whiteliners from Raymond heckled him. Republican organizers, including Caldwell, pleaded for peace, but the afternoon's events quickly spiraled into violence. Eugene Wellborn, another rally organizer, recounted the whiteliners drawing weapons and aiming at the crowd. He likened the sudden burst of gunfire to a downpour, resulting in 3 white and at least 5 black deaths, including 2 children. But the September 4th violence was only a precursor to the impending racial massacre. Fueled by baseless rumors of a black plot against the town, Clinton's mayor called for backup. Hundreds of armed whiteliners arrived in Clinton by train, their ranks increasing to several hundred by dusk. Wellborn recounted the brutal hunting of black men by the whiteliners, akin to shooting birds. Sarah Dickey, an Ohioan white educator who moved to Mississippi to teach black women and children, penned a letter to President Ulysses S. Grant recounting the harrowing scene and emphasizing that the true extent of the Clinton massacre was untold. While no additional white Democrats were killed post-September 4, the black death toll was estimated to be between 35 and 50, with many black victims remaining nameless. William P. Hoffa, a white Republican from Pennsylvania running for re-election as a peace justice, was also lynched. Regardless of numerous pleas for federal aid by Governor Ames, Wellborn, Dickey, and others, President Grant declared on September 13th that he was weary of the South's annual autumnal disturbances, leading to a policy of non-intervention in Mississippi and the former Confederacy. This event became known as the Clinton Riot, or, more commonly, the Clinton Massacre. But the year's end of 1875 did not conclude the reign of terror in Clinton, despite the high number of victims in September. Caldwell was considered absolutely fearless by his contemporaries, white and black. He was a crack shot and racists everywhere feared him. Although he used his power for peace, after the massacre, in an act of self-defense, he led a unit of militia through Clinton to protect his community. For that, he was marked for death. So Caldwell's involvement in arranging the event, advocating for black rights, and standing up for black self-defense placed him in the crosshairs of the vicious, racist ruffians who constantly tormented black citizens, who only wanted to exercise their political freedoms. On December 25th, 1875, Caldwell went into the town of Clinton to learn about his nephew who had been threatened earlier that day. An acquaintance of his, Buck Cabell, invited Caldwell to drink a toast in celebration of Christmas. Caldwell did not want to go, preferring to go home to celebrate Christmas with his wife, but his friend was so insistent that he relented.
Yeah, this is a very familiar story of a man trusting somebody he had no business trusting, and we're about to see what the result is going to be here. So let's continue.
It was a fateful miscalculation. The two men went to the basement of Chilton's store on the northeast corner of Leek and Jefferson Streets. While they stood in the basement, they touched their glasses, apparently a signal for the assassins. Caldwell was shot in the head as he stood with his back to the window. Wounded but still conscious, Caldwell asked to be carried out so he could die like a man. His last request was granted. He was carried out into the street so that all could see he was defiant. Despite his injuries, Caldwell gathered himself together, stood up, straightened his clothes. Then he looked directly at the assassins and said, "Remember, when you kill me, you kill a gentleman and a brave man. Never say you killed a coward. I want you to remember it when I am gone." At that instant, Some 40 shots rang out, delivering the fatal blow. His younger brother Samuel, who had nothing to do with politics, was also killed. Later, racist ruffians burst into Caldwell's home, where his wife had laid out the bodies of the two brothers and raised a ruckus, turning the bodies out of the coffin and cursing them. Such as cowards do, these men couldn't stand up to Caldwell in life, so they could only do so when he could no longer defend himself. No one was ever punished for the crime or those who murdered innocent people at the Clinton rally. Charles Caldwell and other local Southern leaders represented, perhaps better than anyone else, the opportunities that existed under Reconstruction for freed people to develop a potent and responsible class of leaders. That so many influential Black people met the same end as Caldwell illuminates the violence on which democratic power ultimately rests. This has been 400 years. Thank you for joining us on this journey and explore.
All right. So, I mean, the repetitiveness of these situations and circumstances should really make you sick to your stomach, because it's absolutely plays out the same every time. Every situation, every circumstance. Oh, you got me? Oh, we good? Okay. Okay. It's a setup. Oh, now I'm killed. Now, I mean, come on. We got to learn from this. It's not enough to experience it, to recount it. We got to learn from this. How many situations, how many of these videos, how many of these historical points are we going to look at and see every time that your adversary is trying to bring you in, that it's a setup? And yet we go every time.
Con.
We show up and we expect, hey, let's have a drink together. And we get the drink and clink, and I got him. He's in position. Now, man, come on, we got to learn from these things. I'm gonna stop. Go ahead, Doc.
Con, I definitely remember this story now. Remember us covering it. I would like to do some information, digging a little bit deeper into the individuals' names.
Yeah.
The one that set him up, that encouraged him to go have a drink. The individuals that were there, that I'm sure there's a record of it somewhere, because they like to brag about
Right.
different things that they've done. So, I know that, but here's the thing, in time, all of this will be brought to the forefront. And, we say it before, no, they're not going to get away with this.
Exactly. It will not get away. You might be, you may think you got away. You may be thinking that everything is good to go from here, but in reality, no, it will not happen. Just real quick, I did go ahead and Google Senator Charles Caldwell, and yeah, there is a Wikipedia that exists on him here, and when we go into it, they think he was born in either 1830 or 1831, and then he was 1225 when he was killed, 1875. So I shouldn't say killed, I should say murdered.
Right.
Yeah, assassinated, very truthfully. But yeah, we'll have to look at this in depth. Yeah, because it had been a while since we've only seen this one other time. But man, it plays out the same every single situation. Not just Charles Caldwell, all of our setups. You think about the Maccabees. What happened? They got jammed up because the adversary said, "Yeah, let's come together," and then you shouldn't be able to get got with that. Be ready to get rid of your adversaries. Don't be ready to fall victim to them, because they're gonna victimize you every chance they get. And that's the lesson we got to take from this thing. Never trust that enemy. Sir, as iron rust, so is his wickedness. It's not going
Come.
to change. That's not going to change. That's not going to all of a sudden stop being the case. So we got to learn from that thing. It's frustrating, honestly, but I really pray that we learn from this thing and we shouldn't ever fall victim to this. In this age of information, where all of this information is readily available at our fingertips, there's absolutely no reason that we should ever fall victim to any circumstance, any subtle ambush that our adversaries can put against us. I don't care who it is, how they appear, whatever the case. We should already know the only resolution for our adversary is going to be destruction. All right. All right. Next video. This is Literal Savage, the untold story of Thomas Thistlewood. I don't recall Thomas Thistlewood before, but let's see what happened to him and who he was and what he was about. So let's go.
Of time to shed light on the harrowing specter of Thomas Thistlewood. A figure so horrible, his very name conjures up the darkest chapters of human barbarism. In the world of cruelty known as 18th century Jamaica, his reign of terror stands out for sheer savagery and sadism, a testament to the atrocities committed under the guise of commerce and civilization in the Jamaican plantations. Thistlewood's diaries, a macabre testimony etched in the ink of suffering, offer a grim portrait of a life spent in the pursuit of control through fear and punishment. We delve into the abyss, examining not just the acts of one tyrant, but the pervasive and systemic evils of an era that shaped the currents of history. Beware, the details are as unsettling as they are real. Brace yourself for a journey into the heart of darkness that still echoes with the pain of the past. So, prepare to confront the specters of history with us. Born in 1721 in the verdant county of Tuphome, Lincolnshire, England, Thistlewood's story begins far from the shores where his notorious legacy would unfold. Here, in the heart of England's agricultural bastion, young Thomas could not have seemed further from the life that awaited him in the Caribbean. But destiny, it seems, had a different plan. Thistlewood's father was Robert Thistlewood, a tenant farmer. Thomas's elder brother, William, inherited the majority of their father's estate. As a fatherless second son, Thomas faced limited prospects of inheriting substantial property or wealth. After his mother's remarriage, he relocated to Ackworth, West Yorkshire, living with his step-uncle, Robert Calverley. There, he studied mathematics and practical sciences and apprenticed under William Robson. Recognizing the apprenticeship's limited opportunities, Thomas left to forge his own path. After his mother's death on October 7, 1738, Thomas became an orphan at 17, with no inheritance prospects. He pursued various ventures across England. These included returning briefly to Robson's farm, partnering with his brother, and attempting to court a woman named Bet Mitchell, which failed due to her parents' disapproval of his unstable finances and lifestyle choices. Motivated possibly by ambition, the allure of untapped wealth or adventure, little did he know, or perhaps he did, that his arrival in Jamaica would mark the beginning of a reign marked not by benevolence but by terror. In search of better opportunities, Thistlewood set sail for Jamaica on February 1st, 1750. In Jamaica, Thomas Thistlewood established a stable life over 37 years, mainly around Savannah Lamar in southern Westmoreland. His initial role as an overseer was violent and ruthless, evidenced by incidents like the whipping of a slave 300 times. In 1766, Thistlewood bought and named a property Breadnut Island, moving there in 1767. He faced challenges such as harshly managing slaves, tropical storms, and dealing with runaway slaves. Although they ruled with iron fists, there were two things Thistlewood, along with other white Jamaicans, feared most: hurricanes and slave rebellions. Indeed, Thistlewood documented various hurricanes, notably rating the catastrophic 1780 hurricane as a 10, the most violent in Caribbean recorded history. But it was the threat of slave uprisings that constantly concerned him, highlighted in his January 8, 1751 journal entry. "Today first saw a white person since December 19th when I was at Black River." This entry underscores the isolation and vulnerability of overseers. He also recorded the largest 18th century slave rebellion in the British Empire, Tacky's Revolt in 1760, which killed about 50 white people and 500 slaves. The revolt aimed to remove whites and claim Jamaica for the slaves, leading white Jamaicans to enforce control through severe, immediate violence. Within 10 years of arriving in Jamaica, Thistlewood successfully became a plantation owner. His prosperity stemmed directly from exploiting enslaved Africans, whose labor under oppressive conditions fueled his rise. Thistlewood entered Jamaica during the peak of sugar cultivation, a sector thriving on European demand. This industry's dark side was the intensive labor of enslaved Africans, brought forcibly through the Transatlantic slave trade. These individuals, stripped of freedom and rights, were pivotal to the Caribbean sugar industry. In 18th century Jamaica, Thomas Thistlewood was in many respects an ordinary man. But in one way he was extraordinary: his diaries. These journals, spanning 37 years, consist of over 14,000 entries and provide a richly detailed account of Thistlewood's life and era. Each entry serves as a stark testament to the daily horrors endured by enslaved Africans on his Jamaican plantation during the 18th century. Written with chilling precision, these pages offer a deeply unsettling glimpse into the soul of a man driven by a relentless pursuit of control through fear and punishment. Floggings and physical punishment. A recurring theme in Thistlewood's diaries is the use of severe physical punishment, particularly flogging, to enforce discipline and obedience among the enslaved. Floggings were administered for a range of perceived offenses, from minor infractions like stealing food to more significant acts of defiance, such as attempting escape. These punishments were meticulously recorded in Thistlewood's diaries, including the number of lashes and the reasons for the punishment. The physical impact of these floggings was devastating, often leaving the victims with deep wounds, scars, and in some cases, long-term physical disabilities. Confinement and restriction. Confinement was another common form of punishment. Thistlewood's diaries detail how he used stocks and small cages to immobilize and punish slaves. These methods of confinement were not only physically uncomfortable, but were also designed to humiliate and degrade, often leaving the individual exposed to harsh weather conditions and the ridicule of others. Such punishments were typically carried out in public spaces, serving as a warning to other enslaved individuals on the plantation. Mutilation as punishment. Though less frequent, instances of mutilation were among the most barbaric punishments Thistlewood recorded. Mutilation, such as cutting off parts of an ear, was a deeply symbolic act, permanently marking the enslaved as disobedient or troublesome. This form of punishment was intended to be a lasting reminder of the enslaved person's status and the consequences of defying authority. Darby's dose. The most notorious punishment mentioned in Thistlewood's diaries is Darby's dose. This involved forcing one slave to defecate in the mouth of another, then gagging the victim for hours. This punishment exemplified not only physical cruelty, but also profound psychological and emotional abuse. It was designed to be degrading and humiliating, a display of absolute power and control, and to instill fear among the enslaved population. Sexual exploitation and power dynamics. Beyond physical punishments, Thistlewood's diaries reveal a disturbing pattern of sexual exploitation. His documented sexual encounters with 138 enslaved women highlight the deeply rooted power imbalances on the plantation. These relationships, often non-consensual, further dehumanized the enslaved women, reducing them to objects of Thistlewood's desire and control. This aspect of his diaries underscores the intersection of gender, power, and exploitation within the plantation system. Systemic evils of the era. The documented cruelties in Thistlewood's diaries were not isolated incidents, but were reflective of the broader systemic issues of the time. The brutality and dehumanization were integral to maintaining the plantation system and the economic interests it served. These diaries provide critical insight into the everyday realities of slavery, including the normalization of violence and the mechanisms used to enforce the social hierarchy and control over the enslaved population. Trevor Bernard in Mastery, Tyranny, and Desire provides a broader context to Thistlewood's actions, arguing they stemmed from the white settlers' need to dominate an overwhelmingly enslaved population. While Thistlewood occasionally showed signs of humaneness, such as his relationship with Phoeba, his mistress, these instances were exceptions in an otherwise ruthless regime. As a harrowing testament to the cruelty and inhumanity inherent in the slave-holding system of the 18th century, Thistlewood's diaries illuminate the methods used to enforce control and suppress resistance. They serve as a powerful reminder of a dark and brutal chapter in human history, showcasing the depth of suffering inflicted and the resilience of those who endured it. This has been 400 years. Thank you for joining us on this journey of
what a sicko. A filthy, disgusting person who did filthy, disgusting things to people with little ability to resist him. Uh, man, honestly, I didn't know that's what that was. I probably wouldn't even have brought that out. That this seemed like Willie Lynch's cousin or something. I mean, my goodness.
You know what? It's funny that you say that, Doc, because I wonder if they knew each other, if they were contemporaries.
My goodness, what a sicko. At one part, I almost lost my lunch when he was talking about that mess. Ugh, what a disgusting person. You know, I think about what if I could get a hold of this guy. I would probably tie a rope around his big toe and just hang him upside down from a tree until just let him live out all of his days there. Just,
Oh man,
just hang him by his big toe and just leave him upside down and until he is, until his time runs out. That's how sick this guy is. His toe will probably give out and he'd probably fall down and escape. But I don't know. I'll figure something out. I'm trying to figure out how I can torture this guy. I would love to get my hands around his throat and just squeeze. You know what? I wouldn't even put my energy in it. I'd put a snake around his neck and just, let me shut up. Let me shut up. Let me stop. Go ahead.
God, yeah, there's some individuals out that when the time comes, they will be brought forth with chains. It's not my words. It's how the scripts read and what the scripts say. Yeah, I'll just leave it at that. All right.
Kind of leave it at that. I did not expect that. I did not expect that at all. Okay, we're gonna close out with this last video from our dear elder Benaiah Ben Israel. This is the greatest historical discovery of the transatlantic slave trade. The video he put out here just recently. So hopefully this is edifying and kind of lifts our spirits up a little bit because that last one destroyed everything. So, all right.
Come.
I forbid you to communicate freely with your family and friends on social media, all based on how I think and feel. You see, you are hereby shadow banned and de-amplified, suppressed, and censored, all based on the will and the governing authority of the censorship masters. First Amendment rights be damned. You are hereby prohibited from free and fair collaboration, propagation, and dissemination of ideas and thoughts without the expressed approval of the digital overseer. Your channels, shorts, posts, tweets, text, audio, and videos are all under the authority and dominion of the digital overseer. You are hereby monitored and restricted without notification, consultation, or emancipation. It is an indefinite social media incarceration. Your hope is lost. Your freedom deferred. Unless you decide to make a change for freedom.
The history of the Negro has been taught in schools and places of higher learning for centuries. It's a history which includes Africa, slavery, and places to which many of us have been scattered around the world. However, there's a reason why many schools and professors, historians, and researchers have an incomplete understanding of the true history of the Negro. And quite simply, it's because they don't include the laws or decrees issued by the kings who authorized and governed slavery. Many institutions fail to read a single decree by the King of Portugal and Spain, which is why this YouTube video, of all things, is more accurate, more factual than the pseudo-history taught in institutions of higher learning. In this video, we will do something for the first time in modern history in regards to the history of the Negro. We will read the laws and decrees of the kings and queens to see who they said they enslaved and to see what they said to do with them. However, before we review the actual law and decree which started and governed the transatlantic slave trade, let's begin by taking a look at the people targeted and persecuted by the King of Portugal before and during the transatlantic slave trade. Let's begin by taking a look at the Lakesh relief, currently found in the British Museum. You can find the relief by opening your web browser and in your Google search bar, type British Museum Lakesh relief. Enter. And in your results, find the result which contains museum number 124911. That's museum number 124911. Select it. Now navigate to the bottom of the page and select the fourth picture from the left and zoom in to view the ancient tribe of Judah, depicted by the Assyrians who conquered the city of Lakesh. Notice that Judah is depicted with the short, nappy, woolly hair of the Negro. And now be careful of deceivers who would try to hide this truth by deliberately hiding the pictures of the nappy, woolly-headed Judah, and instead show pictures of a people with their head covered. Additionally, a mass grave site was discovered at the Lakesh site, which further validates the nappy, woolly-headed pictures of Judah etched on the walls of the Lakesh relief. As the following reference reads, it reads, Archaeology and Forensic Anthropology, the 701 BC time capsule of Lakesh. Skipping ahead, it reads, no ancient Judean DNA samples have ever been formally published, but we do have a time capsule of data from 701 BCE found at the Judean city of Lakesh in the form of a mass grave that was excavated there. A large mass burial was found dating to the 701 BC Assyrian siege and the conquest of Lakesh, when the Assyrians conquered and brutally murdered the civilian population and exiled the ruling class. The excavator, J.L. Starkley, observed that the skeletons were likely secondary burial, i.e., victims died somewhere else, decomposed, and were reburied here and piled into a disorderly fashion sometime after their death at the hands of the Assyrians during their conquest of Lakesh. Starkley estimated that 1,500 individuals were buried in this mass grave. From these skeletons, 695 skulls were sent to London, England for analysis. The bodies were those of men, women, and children. The Judean civilian population of Lakesh from 701 BCE or 2,710 years ago. And the next reference reads, comparisons are made between Lakesh and 21 ancient Egyptian and allied series of skulls by the method of the coefficient of racial likeness, and a classification of the material is presented. The relationships found suggest that the population of the town in 700 BC was entirely or almost entirely of Egyptian origin. Very close connections with some contemporary Egyptian series being found. They show further that the population of Lachish was probably derived principally from Upper Egypt or Southern Egypt. And the next reference reads, the first report on Lachish skulls included a thorough examination of pathology, metrics, artificial deformation, and epigenetic affinity. Utilizing craniometrics, Risden concluded that the group was very similar to dynastic Egyptian material. In fact, he stated that the entire population was of foreign origin, representing descendants of a group derived primarily from Upper Egypt or Southern Egypt. Skipping ahead, he concluded that the group was fairly heterogeneous, having close relationships to North African, Egyptian, and Nubian groups, thus lending support to an Egypto-Nubian presence. And as this article goes on to state that those Egypto-Nubians were not in fact foreigners, but were natives to the area. Now, these Egypto-Nubian sons of Judah were later taken to Spain in Babylon roughly 140 years later. As the following reference reads, the Spanish Jews are the true descendants from the tribe of Judah and the royal house of David, and were settled in Spain from the time of the captivity of the first temple by Nebuchadnezzar. And then once these nappy-headed sons of Judah were taken to Spain and Portugal, they would be later expelled from Spain and Portugal and placed on the west coast of Africa less than 10 years before the start of the transatlantic slave trade in great numbers. As the following reference reads, for he sent new inhabitants who first settled in Guinea, next in Angola, and lastly on the island of St. Thomas, that so they might be better used to the air, that the said king sold all those Jews for slaves that refused to embrace the Roman religion, and caused their children to be baptized, from whom coming thither in great numbers, most of the present inhabitants were descended. These sons of Judah, transported to the west coast of Africa in great numbers, less than 10 years before the start of the transatlantic slave trade, were called by different names. They were called Lancados, Degradados, Tangamos, Portugalese, and they were also called Negroes. And so the sons of King Dawid multiplied and began to spread throughout West Africa. Before the first transatlantic slaves were sent from the west coast of Africa, the sons of King Dawid were well established. That is, until a series of historical events occurred that would change the world as we know it forever. First, King Manuel changed the trade policy for West Africa. Instead of using Lancados to conduct the trade, he switched to something else. And as a result, he no longer needed the Lancados. In fact, it meant that they were in the way. As the following reference reads, things changed under King Manuel I. At the beginning of his reign, King Manuel did not lease trading rights with Gambia to Portuguese merchants or Lancados, as he did with the rivers of Guinea and Sierra Leone. And so once King Emmanuel changed the way he made his money, he no longer needed the brews. In fact, they were in the way. And so on March 15th, 1518, the year the first slaves were shipped directly from Africa to America, he sent Bernardino Gomez to orchestrate a massive manhunt of Lancados. And he used the newly created law of King Manuel to do it. As the following reference reads, King Manuel also had further threats in store for those Lancados, who were already on the coast in large numbers. On the 15th of March, 1518, he commissioned Bernard M. Gomez to sail to Guinea to superintend the removal of the Lancados. And the next reference reads, and it reads, the crown at first encouraged the policy of having Lancados in this region to facilitate commerce. Degradados sailed on the voyages of both Vasco da Gama and Pedro Alvarez Cabral. Da Gama took 12 Degradados with him and probably several in Southeast Africa. Once in place, it became clear that the Portuguese crown was unable to control them. In an effort to keep these regions free of non-Portuguese commercial activities, in 1518, the crown reversed the policy of creating Lancados and attempted to round them up. And the following reference reads, and it reads, finally, on March the 15th, 1518, he published a violent charter for which he sent a special ship commanded by Bernard M. Gomez to the ports of Guinea with the mission of getting all the Christian Lancados who were there to board. Those who returned to Europe obeying this order would be forgiven as long as they paid the 10 cruzados along with half of their possessions or their farms. Those, however, who refuse to embark and to leave the lands of Africa would be handed over to the African kings to be killed. The permit authorized Captain Bernard M. Gomez to offer to the indigenous chiefs all the gifts that were necessary to achieve the delivery or the murder of those Lancados. It seems that these violent measures by monarch Venturoso were intended to reach Jews and foreign adventurers who spread freely along the African coast. And so the law that was written just a few years before against the Lancados was now fully enforced, and a worldwide decree was given to all of Portugal's allies in Africa and abroad. And the message was clear. Go, hunt them down, and bring them to me, no matter where they are or how long it's been. Find them. I hereby authorize everyone to hunt them, to take all their possessions. You have my permission. You can keep half of their possessions. Just bring the other half to me, and bring them to me in chains. Bring them to the judges of Guinea as prisoners. And to all those looking for slaves, you can now purchase them from Africa, from the judges of Guinea, for they are now under the judgment of natural death. Now, that was a summary and a paraphrase of a law that's roughly 20 pages long. And with that being said, let's take a closer look at this law issued by King Manuel, who started the transatlantic slave trade and also started it from Africa. This is the law that's never taught in any institutions of learning. A copy of this law can be found in Portugal's National Library. And you can check the description of this video for a link of your very own copy of a non-translated copy. Now, this document is written in ancient Portuguese, which doesn't translate well in Google Translate. So with that being said, we were blessed to have the help of a kind, helpful sister, Ema, professor, perfectionist, along with a professional translation company to review and certify these translations. And with that said, here are a few important excerpts from our translations. First, the law starts by stating the people of whom it is for. Researchers agree this law was written specifically for Lancados. We see this in books from the 1900s. We also note that this law describes the targeted people as being those sent and those who go to Guinea. This lines up with the groups of King Dawood's sons that we reviewed earlier in this video. Some were sent by way of the expulsion edicts, and some fled on their own. Those are the ones who go to Guinea without the king's consent. So hopefully you can see this is just one big story that started in Spain and Portugal and made its way into Africa. As the following reference reads, and it reads, regarding those who are sent to Elmina or those who go to Guinea without the permission from the king, as well as those who do not comply with the rules. Here's a copy of the notes from one of our translators. These points have been validated using additional books and references. And it says, the fifth book is about the punishments or the ordinances for those that, one, went to Guinea with the consent of the king, but didn't keep his rules. Main crimes against the kingdom: they didn't keep the Catholic faith, they didn't pay taxes, or they had multiple wives. Point two, those that were sent to Guinea as punishment for not converting to the Catholic faith, so they couldn't go back by their own will. They were required good behavior, but they would often incur the same crimes. Reparations were paid to the kingdom in silver, gold, merchandise, and labor. The law then goes on to summarize the reason for the law. And it reads, the ordinations and the laws which have thus far been created for things related to our town, Elmina, and for things related to Guinea, are not going well and are not being declared like they should. Therefore, our service needs to step up and help preserve the enforcement of laws, since we are suffering quite a bit. If we take action, such attitude will be useful to all our kingdoms and all the governors and landlords, and also help with the excommunications that have been going on in many kingdoms. However, many laws have not even been created or confirmed yet. This situation is generating a lot of confusion and questions. We need to show that we have the ability to govern properly. The laws that talk about our mind and what we managed to take away from Guinea were idealized by my uncle, King Alfonso, as well as my cousin, King John. Something which they should take a lot of credit for. In the following paragraph, we will write what the law must be. The law basically states that these people could not buy or sell in West Africa without first having written permission from Portugal. And if the Lancados or sons of King Dawood broke this law, the sentence involved turning over the lawbreakers to the Portuguese judges and being sentenced to natural death, aka slavery. As the following reference reads, and it reads, by law, we are ordering all people not to go out of our ships or go to other lands and seas or places that we have conquered, with the objective of waging war or stealing things in our name. Such things should not be done without our permission. The person who does this shall be killed as punishment, which is natural death and slavery. The person who does this can also lose all their belongings and goods. This punishment also goes to all those people who attempt to steal things from our ships, like machinery, mechanical parts, or artillery. Those who are found wandering around other seas shall face the consequences. However, those who were found but have not done anything wrong shall be spared. We need to know all the information we can about the occurrences so we can order the correct punishment to be applied or not. And by this law of ours, we give place and license to all captains, pilots, masters, or landlords of our ships, or our keepers, or any other person of our kingdom, or landlords that those parts for their privilege or by our permission they go. We here state the permission to go to those places, and every ship, land, seas that they find, they are allowed to take them and bring all the people they find as prisoners. And as a message to those who defile us will be delivered to our judge of Guinea, which is the west coast of Africa. And by him be judged. Half of what they had will be divided by those who brought them, and the other half will be ours. And last but not least, the same law that authorized the taking of these people also authorized for the first time the taking of slaves from the west coast of Africa. As the following reference reads, and it reads, we are also certified to give permission to the captains of our ships and to order them to go to Elmina or to Sao Tome and to Principe Islands to trade and to negotiate. However, a trip to Sao Tome and Principe Islands should be taken when it is really necessary. There, our ships might have the possibility of buying many slaves to bring to our kingdoms, as well as other things that can be purchased. Ladies and gentlemen, this law written by the King of Portugal is the actual law that started the transatlantic slave trade from Africa to the Americas. It is a law written specifically for Lancados, who are Black Portuguese, who are Spanish Jews, who are Negroes, who are the sons of King Dawid. For the first time in modern history, we have uncovered the greatest secret of the transatlantic slave trade. This is history in the making.
All right. Praises to the Abba once again for our dear beloved Elder Benaiah Ben Israel for sharing that good information for us. Man, to think about that instituting a instruction or a law concerning the institution of the transatlantic slave trade, and that's what our people had to deal with. That's what the trigger was to get us into this situation. And all these generations later, here we are, yet in the land of our captivity, still dealing with situations, circumstances, and all of that pertaining to this particular captivity. So unreal. But I'll yield there. Go ahead, Art.
Karnak, definitely always all ears when Elder Benaiah has brought out a video. You know, he's been I would say instrumental in this awakening that, you know, began by the Most High. You know, I would say that the Most High has definitely used him to help connect the dots on what's going on. Yeah, and we'll continue to stay posted with what he's got going on. You know, he's in talks with not just Israelites here in the United States, but abroad as well. So he's a bridge for the people. Also, all praises to the Most High.
Hallelujah. All praises indeed. All right, that's what we have for you for this particular segment of video review. About an hour and 15 minutes we're there, so we'll go ahead and close it on out. Praises to the Abba. Join us here. We'll get into our scripture reading just shortly, and we'll continue in the book of Numbers, reading the text as we look to close out Torah here in the next couple of more weeks. We're going to give praises to the Abba and close out with the book of Ecclesiastes, chapter number 12 and verse number 13. Let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear the Most High and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. It is so very important that we understand that in the conclusion of the whole matter, we are to fear the Most High and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. At the end of the day, when it is all said and done, all the dust is settled and all the smoke is cleared, we will be judged on whether we have feared the Most High and kept his commandments. Why? Because this is the whole duty of man. I am your Akazaki Yahoo, giving all praises, honor, and great Salakia. I am your Akazaki Yahoo, joined by my most esteemed Akinanaya, giving all praises, honor, and great esteem unto the Most High Power, Yahuwah Bahashem, Yahushua HaMashiach, and to the 12 tribes of Israel who are scattered to the four quarters of the earth. I say shalom, wa baruchim, that is peace and blessings. And I cannot wait till the day that the Most High brings us back together, and we are once again 12 tribes, one family, one nation under the Most High Power, under one covenant, back in our own land with a heart of flesh and no more a heart of stone, with our enemies, our adversaries, and all those who hate us under our feet. Until that day come, Shabbat Shalom, family.
Shabbat Shalom, Mr. Pekah.
All praises to the Abba. Praise you, Abba Yah. Hallelujah. Barak